I was talking to Mark earlier, and we were talking about what would we say at this presentation, and I've been able to work with Mark for the last several years in his practice, and we've seen considerable growth. And I'll just tell you off the bat that I deeply respect Mark. I think he is a man with great impact. He's making a deep impact in his family, his staff, his patients, his community. And it's really exciting to have a chance to hopefully say something or sow a seed that might be useful. There's a statistic that you'll read and is actually true in both nonprofit and for-profit work that 50% of small businesses are going to fail. But some of them don't. And I've had the privilege of interviewing hundreds of entrepreneurs and reading the books and the articles and studying, and I really wanted to know, what are those core principles, what are the fundamentals of those organizations that not only don't close the doors, but also make an impact. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. So if you give a presentation, you have to have either 5 of these or 7 of these. So I have 12 fundamentals for growing an organization. So to teach these fundamentals, I use the analogy of growing a tree. Looking at the season of where you are and what should you focus on is a fundamental. The second is to focus on your customer. Focusing on your customer is looking at the soil. Your seed is your vision, mission, values. So an acorn, I love this little Vanderbilt logo here because I've got both the acorn and the oak tree leaf. So an acorn has the potential to grow an oak tree that will grow 80 feet tall and 80 feet wide. It'll also produce 15 million new acorns. And the vision, mission, values that you have inside of you is like that acorn. The fourth fundamental is your time. And I think of your time like water. I can have the best soil, I can have the best seed, but if I don't pour water on that thing, it's not going to grow. The fifth fundamental is to write your priorities and goals. It's like the taproot. You break out of your shell and you dig deep. Sixth fundamental, create a budget. Budget is like the trunk of the tree. It holds everything together. The seventh fundamental is to invest in community. Community is the roots that grow your tree. The eighth fundamental is to find mentors. This is the question, who's pulling your weeds? The ninth fundamental is innovative growth, which starts with pruning and then choosing very specifically what avenues you're going to pursue. The 10th fundamental is to empower your team, and I use an acronym for this, LEAVES, which I'll share in a bit, and then measure correctly, which is the fruit, and then market strategically, which is basket, BASKET. Let's start with some common obstacles. I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, multimillionaires, barely make it through-millionaires. And one of the things that I've learned from almost all of them towards the end of their career is that success didn't give me the happiness I thought it would. Bigger house, a bigger office, a more successful this or that or the other thing. It didn't actually scratch the itch. There's a reason why so many people have a midlife crisis. It's not because they don't reach their goals. It's because they reach their goals and they're like, I'm still not satisfied. So how do you overcome that obstacle? It's interesting, when we start our career and we start thinking about goals, we generally write goals based on success factors. I want to make X money, I want to do X travel, I want to have X bucket list. But the thing that actually brings the most satisfaction are the goals that are created via significance factor. What do I want people to say about me? What impact do I want to make? Things like that. I've got 2 suggestions. The first is to ask yourself, what do you want to be remembered for? If you were able to attend your own funeral and you were to take the top 5 things that you wanted people to say about you at your own funeral, what would those 5 things be? So I did this, and what didn't show up on the list was, he had a really great house. He had a really nice sports car. I started thinking through things about my family and my life and my mission and impact. The second is create BHAG goals. So in the book Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about BHAG goals, big, hairy, audacious goals. And I think that people should create goals that are 20 years ahead, and then 3 years and 1 year. Creating a 20-year goal is a BHAG goal. So looking at physical, spiritual, relational, educational, career, mission, financial. There's a great quote by Norman Vincent Peale, "Shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars." Mark, what would you say about that in your practice? And
the thing about goal setting is just start. Just put something on paper. You know, I used to sit around and I'd think for an hour, I'd be like, man, I never put anything down. It's like, just get something down on paper, and you can always adjust it, you can always change it. With goals, you sort of look with the end in mind. If I want to run a marathon, I'm going to go, okay, I got to run 26.2 miles. Okay, and then you start working backwards, going, okay, there's my goal. What do I have to do to get there?
second fundamental, focus on your customer. I have worked with so many different entrepreneurs. Most of them can fall into one or two camps. One of them makes a lot more money than the other. The first camp is the "this is what I want to do" camp. They choose what they want to do, and then they try to go find people who will pay for that. The other camp looks and says, where are the problems that I can solve? And how does what I'm able to do solve those problems? Which camp of those do you think makes more money? Solve a problem, you get paid. Think about the customer. Who has the problem that you can solve?
You know, so oftentimes when you interact and deal with referrals, and really the public in general, is you're letting them know what you offer. We do implants, we do third molars, we do whatever it is you're going to end up doing. Someone had said, you know, have you ever asked them what they want? And I was like, wow, you know, I've never really thought about that. So, and it sounds like, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. So I just sat down with 10 of my referrals and I said, hey, if you could have an oral surgeon in your back pocket and could just have them do, how could I best benefit you? What would you want? It's the 3 o'clock Friday afternoon work-in. They're like, who wants to do that? Nobody. But that's what your customer service or your customer base wants. And so as we started looking at numbers, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I found out that over a third of the implants I was putting in were work-ins after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The general dentist never even talked to him about putting an implant in. There's a pain that was met within the market that just came out of me asking the question, what is it that you really need? And I was a little shocked with what I heard. So if you ask the question, be prepared to hear something you may not want to hear, but it may be what your customer base wants to send. So,
okay, the third obstacle, how do I compete? We live in a ridiculously competitive marketplace. Being good enough and doing a service that's good enough isn't good enough. Even if you make it to the top, you've got to fight to stay at the top. So how do I compete when the marketplace is so saturated with competition? I would say that these are actually the fundamental ways to gain market share. The first is convenience, the second is consistency, and then the third is a competitive advantage. Think about convenience. Amazon Prime comes out and tells me that I can buy anything from them and it'll be at my house in 2 days. And I realized for me, that's a lot more convenient than having to go to the store or the mall or get out of my house. It comes to me. Well, I started buying like 80% of everything that I buy from Amazon Prime. And even if I go to the store, now I search Amazon Prime. They created convenience. The second is consistency. If I go to an Italian restaurant and I have my favorite spaghetti and I eat that spaghetti and it tastes great, and then I go the next week and something's a little off in the recipe, well, I'm not going to go there again. What do you do to ensure that on your worst day, you're giving an exceptional experience and service to your clients? How can you be very consistent? And finally, there's a competitive advantage. What's your unfair advantage? What can you do that somebody else just can't do? Well, maybe you've done so many of a certain surgery that you can do it in half the time. Or maybe you can buy 5,000 units of something that somebody else can only buy 1,000, so you can get the price down so much. But adding convenience, consistency, and a competitive advantage, those are 3 ways to gain market share. So when you look at going into a market where people already exist, ask yourself, what could I do to be just a little more convenient? What could I do to be just a little bit more consistent? What could I do to just have a competitive advantage? Another obstacle that we all face, especially in this day and age, is distraction. When you run a business, one of the largest distractions you will face is actually day-to-day operations. The whirlwind of the amount of things that need to get done every day is actually the largest distraction that you will have to maximizing the full potential of your organization. If you don't schedule time to step out of the whirlwind, it'll never happen, and you get stuck in the day-to-day operations. The same thing is true for your leaders and your managers and the other people that you're working with. It goes back to the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is the Stephen Covey matrix. In the first quadrant here, we have urgent and important. This is your taxes are due tomorrow. In the second quadrant, you've got non-urgent and important. This is your taxes are due in 3 months. In the third quadrant down here, you have urgent but non-important. This is sitting in your office and somebody comes in and says, you've got to check out this great video. Oh my goodness, this is so great. And then in the fourth quadrant, you have non-urgent and non-important tasks, which is making it to level 908 on Candy Crush Saga. I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs. When I go in to work with a client, they spend the vast majority of their time in important and urgent. And what happens when you spend all of your time doing important and urgent? You live in the whirlwind. Here's what happens. You get burnt out. So what do you do when you're burnt out? You go down here to Candy Crush Saga. So I'm urgent, important, I'm stressed, I'm burnt out. I'm going to go watch movies, I'm going to go zone out. And then, oh crap, I didn't get this thing done. And I go back and I'm important and urgent. On this other hand here, this distraction leading to mediocrity, if you allow yourself to be interrupted by social media and advertising and people and phone calls and all of this stuff, you're going to end up living their dreams. Advertisers make more money than doctors because they are fantastic about getting you to live their dream. I recommend to business owners, number one, create a scheduled time where you can work on the business and make it a rhythm. Do it religiously.
Yeah, all I was going to say on that is the majority of practices live in the urgent and important world. We're putting out fires, and you're doing it all day long. But you have to be intentional about it. So,
the next obstacle that we're going to face in running a business is balance. How do you balance growth and stability at an organization? Quarterly priorities and goals keep you focused and on track for balancing growth and stability. The challenge is, where do I set those quarterly priorities and goals? Like, what categories do I need to create priorities and goals for if I'm working on the business? So there's 4 different categories. The first category is resource management. The second category is teamwork. The third is productivity, and the final is marketing. And just think about it. So I only have a limited amount of time, talent, and treasure. That's my resource. So the first thing I have to look at, if I want to grow my practice to X size or something, I can't go use something I don't have. I have to work with what I have. The most valuable asset in any organization is your team. If my team isn't working together, our resources aren't going to get spent efficiently. My resources and my team allow us to be productive. Doing our work allows us to create stories that we can then market. Here's what we did, here's the customers we served, here's a great story. That marketing gives us more resources that we manage. We filter through our team, we filter through productivity and marketing, so there's a continual cycle. Setting core priorities and goals in these 4 areas is really important. An additional step in that is a tool called Moscow. When you look at your priorities and goals, ask yourself, what kind of priority and goal is this? Is this an M? This is a must do? like the alternator's broke and so I need to go fix it on the car or it won't run? Is this an S? This is a should do? Well, our oils needs changed. We're at 3,200 miles or whatever. Is this a C? Is this a could do? Well, maybe we need to put some new fancy rims on this thing so that it just looks a little more styling. Or is this a wait for later? Well, it's that dent in the bumper that, it's not really more important than all of these things. When you write your goals, you are 42% more likely to achieve them than when you don't write them. Setting up quarterly priorities and goals and writing them down and then adding your prioritization creates exceptional growth in an organization, and it really helps you balance growth and stability.
No, I was just going to, this was Sunday night from 9 to 10. This was just, I just took a template, and you can find them wherever, but just, what it does, the way Joshua has it set up is it's got the 4 basic categories of your business, and it breaks it down into subcategories. And just, if I can urge you anything, just take the first step. Just write something down. It doesn't have to be perfect, and maybe something you know nothing about. Just put it on the sheet, and then weekly I just kind of look at this and I go, okay, is this something I need to take care of? Is it something Joshua does? Is it something my office manager does? Who handles all these? And then you can sort of just let it go. And that's where really having an organization and being a business leader, it's not you micromanaging every single aspect of your business, but it is giving vision to the business. It's like, okay, here's where we want to go. Here's the things that are important, and I'm going to hand these tasks off. And then I can get back to doing whizzies and implants and whatever.
All right, here's a big obstacle. Surprise. Budgeting is not fun. Who likes budgeting? I don't have a single hand. Yeah. This is the reality. Budgeting is not fun. But if we're using the analogy that I was sharing before, that budget is like the trunk of the tree. It holds everything together. There's a great quote by Dave Ramsey that says, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. So how do I overcome the obstacle of budgeting is not fun? The first step is so simple that it's often just completely overlooked. Understand the vocabulary. If I start talking to somebody about computers and I don't understand what they're saying, then I get frustrated and suddenly it's not fun anymore. And as a non-physician, when I talk to physicians and you start using vocabulary words that are a little bit unfamiliar to me, then the whole process just becomes a little bit like, ugh. But the vocabulary terms that are necessary for running a business are not that difficult. Actually, I created a list. I'll be glad to send it to you, like the 25 terms you should know so that you can have a great conversation with your CPA. But take some time and just learn the vocabulary. It makes budgeting a lot easier. The second is finding the right CPA. A CPA that has the heart of a teacher is a must if you want to grow a business. And you've got to think about this. Your CPA is dealing with hundreds of other companies. So you sit down with them and you kind of like get this idea of like, oh, they're only working with me. They're working with hundreds of other companies. So what happens is it's really hard to find a CPA that actually looks hard enough at your numbers to give you suggestions. When you find that kind of CPA, you've got the exact right fit. Okay, so the third point is hiring somebody that's an expert in tax savings.
Can I say on that real quick though, like when people come in and they want to talk about implants, I talk to them about doing nothing, a bridge, and a partial. I don't do those, but I'll just say, okay, here's your options. And so a person that understands the tax law knows how to navigate you through the various options. And really, if it's in the law, it's legal. But if I don't understand the law, if I don't understand my options, then it's not even offered to me. And so there are guys out there, it's perfectly legal. They just understand the law so well that they know how to navigate you through that.
The third thing in the financial scene is creating an activity-based budget. Generally, when you create a budget, there's 3 types of budgets. One is an industry standard budget. So I look out and say, okay, I'm an oral surgeon, there's other oral surgeons, what do they spend? I create my budget like that. Another is, let me just do a little bit better than last year. So we were here, I want to do a 7% increase, what's this? The third way, and I believe is the best way, is to actually create a budget based on what you actually need for your products, your services, your activities, your different projects that you're going to do throughout the year. And the reason why this is a better way is because ultimately your finances should be a feedback mechanism towards your future decisions. Accountants primarily look at data from a historical standpoint. Oh, here's what you did. If you set up your budget in an activity-based way, you're not only able to look at the historical data, you're also able to look and forecast what decisions should you make in the future. This is an obstacle that that many business owners don't think about. A decline in your community will create a decline in your business. And no one else in a community has the potential to impact that community than the small business owners that are in that community. If you run a business in a community, you want to try your best to keep that community healthy. So how do you invest in your community? It's frustrating sometimes if you do charity work or you get involved with different organizations. They only want money. But your money is really simply the result of what you do with your life energy. Like, in a sense, your money is just energy. But the wisdom that you have, the tools that you've learned, the relationships that you've made, all of the things that you acquire when you run a business are so valuable. Choose where you want to make an impact. Some people watch a movie about like a hunger crisis or something and they're like, oh man, that's really bad. Other people watch it and they're just in tears. So those things that just really hit you, there's a good likelihood that you can make a deep impact with that thing. And then secondly, like, okay, how are you going to invest? Are you going to, really dive in? Is it speaking or serving or teaching or counseling, or maybe it is giving and investing, leadership or mentorship? When you invest in your community, it impacts the community. There's also a phenomenal return on community investment. The majority of the best vendors that I've ever worked with, I've met at like a community service event. So you're here at the soup kitchen and you're dishing up soup and you're talking to this person right here and like, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm a banker at XYZ. Okay, and now I've got a relationship. Well, somebody that's out serving the community anyway is going to be able to be the kind of person that I want to work with. So it's really, don't serve your community just for the strategic relationships that you'll make, but when you serve your community, you're going to make incredible strategic relationships.
Yeah, I think that if you don't hear anything today, that this is probably the most significant point on the list. Healthcare providers are still looked at within the community in high regard. When it comes to giving back, you sort of set the standard. And so a lot of people are watching what you're doing, not just in the dental community, but around the community. And it's just a great way to give back.
Here's obstacle 8. You don't know what you don't know. So what do I do about the things that I don't know? I have a friend who is an orthodontist. And I went to his house that was like a palace, and I was helping him give a presentation to this really elite group of other orthodontists, all over the world, and it was like how to be the best of the best of the best. And I said to this guy, I said, how did you, golly, how did you just become so successful? And he said, I hire experts. And he's like, the real problem is finding the right expert. If you hire the wrong expert, you spend a lot of money. If you hire the right expert, you make a lot of money. He's like, I've got an expert for where to put my chair. I got an expert for what software I should use. I got an expert for what accounting I should use. I got an expert for how to shine my shoes. I hire experts. And finding the right vendor and the right experts to help your organization is fundamentally, it's critical. So I put together a little list for how do I find a good vendor, an expert, somebody that I want to safely spend money with. So here's a couple questions. One, is this what they do every day? It's not your brother-in-law. It's not somebody, you know, that seems like they can do it or has the best sales pitch. You've got to ask, is this what you do every day? And then, do they have a proven track record? Who have you worked with? What has been the results there? The second is scalability. Can they grow with you as you grow? Can your vendor expand? Now, sometimes you just use a different vendor, but if you really like someone, you can work with them for a while. Do the leaders of the company have a clear vision for their future? The third is dependability. Do they show up on time, and are they still good even on their worst day? Efficiency. Do they have a continual improvement process? Are they able to not only put out fires, but prevent them from happening? I'll pick on Dr. Mark a little bit.
Go ahead. An easy target.
So I go in to work with Dr. Mark, and I'm hanging out at the office, and I'm interviewing his staff, and I'm looking at all the numbers, and I'm trying to, you know, figure out how things are going on. And every other day, I'm seeing the tech guy. So I'm meeting the tech guy, I'm hanging out with the tech guy, and you know, I like the tech guy, he's like such a nice guy. And I'm like, why am I seeing the tech guy every other day? If the tech guy is doing his job, he shouldn't be here every other day. And so Dr. Mark is paying the tech guy that everybody loves, he's the nicest guy, and it's so fun, but all he does is put out fires. And I started thinking, you know, the job of technology is to prevent fires from happening and make things fast. So if you've got a great tech guy that has to be there all the time, they haven't done their job. So are they able to not only put out fires, but prevent fires from happening? So right now in the office, I haven't seen the tech guy in like 6 months. We got a different tech guy. And finally, you've got authenticity. I mean, it's work with people who are comfortable in their own shoes. Why do I want to go to work with somebody that just, you know, they're oh, I'm afraid to work with you or something like that? Find people that are comfortable with themselves. Do they drink their own Kool-Aid? So if I can find all these check boxes as yes, then generally it's a pretty good vendor. The second is a mentor. Mentors are invaluable because a mentor they don't only save you like hours, they save you years. Like there are people out there that can save you years of doing the wrong thing. But a good mentor, there's a mutual benefit. So I invest in them, they invest in me. There's a mutual, you know, benefit there. But do they get your type of work? You know, they need to at least understand or be in some kind of affiliated field to really be a valuable mentor to my business. Are they interested in you? Are they able to see things you can't see? Do they share your values? Are they willing to give or contribute towards your success?
Okay, I'm 47. Like everything for you guys is like, I'm going that way. I'm getting finished with my training. I'm going to start my practice. And then you sort of get to this point and you go, oh, wow, I see this little light down there at the end of the road. And it's like, oh, that's the end of life. And so you view things a little bit differently. There are people within, I would say, my space and forward who their primary goal waking up every day is to find people like you, and they would love to pour out themselves to you. They'll give you every pearl of wisdom they've ever learned in life, but you just have to be willing to ask. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in oral surgery, because I go to a coaching program in Chicago quarterly, and there are people from every walk of life running small business, and it's just a big think tank. And it's great because we all deal with the same problems. Mine has oral surgery on it, and he may have 10 pizza stores or whatever. We all have the same problems. And so I always look for the guys with the gray hair, or women with the gray hair. I've got a couple women in my life that speak a lot of truth. So yeah, mentors just save you a lot of pain, but you've got to ask, hey, can we just sit down and have coffee? And just pick their brain and then listen.
All right, here's one that we all face running a business: fear. I think that fear is a good time to innovate. So if you feel afraid, start thinking innovatively. So how do you do that? There's a great quote by Peter Drucker who said that every year you should look at your organization and ask yourself, is there anything in this organization that if I wasn't already doing it, I would not start it again today? And if there are items that you wouldn't readily start again, prune them off. Because what's happening is they're adding clutter to your organization. They're taking resource away from your future. A lot of times we're afraid simply because we don't have enough resource. Well, prune off some extra stuff and you have more resource. If I prune an apple tree, there's 3 branches that you want to prune off of an apple tree. The first is a branch that's overextended. So I've got my apple tree and it gets this really big branch, and so that branch gets real thick, and guess what happens to the root system? The tree starts leaning over. I see this all the time. There's entrepreneurial leaders and they get really fascinated with one thing. Oh my goodness, there's this thing and I'm making so much money on this, and it's not in my business, but I've got this big thing, it's this big branch. And what happens is they put so much focus on that they take away focus from the rest of the whole organization. And what happens is your whole organization is now in peril because I've so focused on this one thing. Taking a clippers and pruning it back creates health. Now don't cut it off, it's still a great thing. But keep your whole organization healthy, not just one thing. Another one is a branch, 2 branches that are laying on top of each other. And what happens there is those 2 branches will create a fungus, and that fungus will spread to the whole tree. Micromanagement is just like that. And you have 2 kinds of micromanagement that you're going to deal with in your leaders. Some is, they don't let people do their job. I hired one person to do the job and somebody else is coming in all the time and being all over them. You have to cut either one of those off. The second is not micromanager, but a hero manager. And this is more likely the problem that you're going to run into. You're going to hire the wonder office manager who just solves everybody's problem. And what happens is that person underdevelops your team because they solve everybody's problem. And now you build your organization up to such a scale with a wonder hero manager, and then that hero manager gets an offer for another 20 grand a year from somebody else. And now you either got to shell out another 20 grand a year, or you lose that office manager, and now your whole organization was not really an organization, it was one person that was handling all of the problems. So instead, there's a statement that leaders create followers, but exceptional leaders create new leaders. The number one question within your management is my manager creating a leader? And building a system. So you have to prune micromanagement, you also have to prune hero management. You can have the best person on your team, if they don't make leaders, they can actually be a problem. And then finally, there's this thing on a tree called a sucker, and it shoots up from the root of the tree, and it looks really great, but it doesn't actually produce fruit for that tree. So in any organization, we always hire people that we really like the tech guy, but they're not actually helping the organization, and they're hard to fire because everybody likes them. But if they're not the right fit to feed into the organization, you've got to cut that off. Another way to overcome fear is just to embrace it. In an organization, there are no-risk tasks, and then there are risky tasks. Guess where growth happens? Growth doesn't happen without risk. A friend of mine he was the president of Husky Lumber, and but before that he was president of a hospital. And he came into the hospital and they were in a 5-year deficit. The whole system was just tanking. And he turned it around in 1 year. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, well, when I came in, every single person in the organization was afraid of everything because the management was so bad, they slapped them anytime they took a risk. So nobody wanted to take any risks, so we weren't seeing any growth. And he said, here's what I did. I came in and I said, we are going to create a failure-embracing culture. And here's what I want you to do. I want your best idea, and we're going to try it. And if it works, we're going to celebrate because it worked. And if we try it and there's no result, we're going to celebrate because we got smarter. And if we try it and it abysmally fails, we're going to celebrate because we got smarter, and I'll tell everybody it was my idea. And he actually built that culture, and it turned the whole place around.
I was just going to say, risk and failure are two words that are so counterintuitive to everything you've heard to this point in your life. It's you don't take risks. It's all research-based decision making. Failure is unacceptable. You're dealing with failure. Let's get that number down as much as you can. In the business world, you embrace calculated risk, and failure is just an opportunity to learn. It is so counterintuitive to everything you do, but if you can have some amount of risk involved in what you're going to do, that's really how you grow.
The next obstacle we're going to talk about is people. People are what make work interesting, and people are what make work interesting. One of the primary things that I look at when I'm researching a team is I'm looking for mini-me's. So what happens is that most of the time in an interview process, we're more likely to hire someone who's just like us. So we start the interview process and we're like, oh, you did that? Oh, I liked that. Oh, you said, oh, I like that. Oh, you've got skill sets there. Well, I understand how valuable that is. And so we hire mini-me. And the problem is the organization doesn't need another you. Most of the time we need somebody who's actually different than us. And what happens is that the more personality intelligence and the more maturity you have in an organization, the more celebration there is of difference. And the more difference there is, the more strength there is in your organization. Looking at leveraging and empowering a team, I use an acronym here following with the tree analogy that, you know, the L is to leverage technology. The E is effective communication. The A is accountability. And then the V is very clear expectations, the E is employee incentive, and the S is systematic feedback. And we don't have time to go into all these. I do all these in different seminars. But I do want to point out the V, E, and S. Whoever you are working with on a team, they have three questions. The first question is, what's in it for me? It's incentive. The second question is, what is expected of me? What do I have to do? And the third question is, where do I stand? It's feedback. And if any one of your employees is missing any of those ingredients, it creates like distance, it creates conflict. If I go into an office and let's say there's a conflict where I've got two office managers or two people on the team and they're fighting, my very first question is this an incentive issue? It's just not worth it to come to work? You know, maybe they're not making enough money, so they're grumpy. Is this a expectation issue? I've given somebody a job that I think they should be able to do, but they don't know exactly what to do? Or is this a feedback issue? Maybe they haven't been told, hey, that kind of behavior is unacceptable. And if you give incentive and expectation and feedback, you can solve almost any team issue. Another thing is just looking at strengths. There's a great book called Strength Finders, and I love this book because it's not about here's where you're weak, it's only about strengths. The role of a team is to maximize strengths and to make weaknesses irrelevant. So if your team sees their job as to maximize the strengths of others and to make the weaknesses of others irrelevant, that team will be incredibly strong. So in a team, you have strategic thinking is the first step. This is coming up with the plan. Relationship building is building the team to accomplish the plan. Influencing is getting people on the track to actually do the work. It's motivation. And then execution is the fourth step. So if there's not a good balance in your organization of each of those four things, then you find a lot of frustration.
The people within your business is the hardest thing that you have to deal with. The wisdom teeth and the implants, all the stuff you're going to do, that you'll hear it said a lot, that's the easiest part of your day. And the struggle is you have that great employee and then she goes, I'm putting in my 2-week notice. And you're like, I thought she was so happy. And it's like you never understood what really made her tick. And I'll just tell you, in the people you're hiring now, money is, yeah, I mean, you don't want to pay them beans, but it is low on the totem pole. They've got things that incentivize them, and if you can really get to the depth of what it is that makes them tick and why do they want to come to work and what's their life goal, All of those things, that come out of a lot of this testing will hopefully save you a lot of heartache, because a bad day now is, Dr. McKenna gives you an extra call day, but a bad day when you get out is that key employee puts in that 2-week notice, and you are just, you don't sleep a lot. It's,
yeah.
Anyway.
The next obstacle is measuring correctly. Imagine that you're going to go and get on an airplane, and you walk into the airplane and you look down into the cockpit, and the pilot is standing there, but there's not a single dashboard in the plane. And you talk to the pilot and you say, so, there's no dashboards here. And he's like, it's okay, I've been flying for a really, really long time. Actually, check this out. Here's my little fuel gauge. We've got plenty of fuel. Are you going to get in that plane, and are you going to fly on that plane? I'm not. I want to know, well, what about our altitude, and what about, our thrust and all of these things? So many business owners get so confused with all the dashboard stuff, like if I step into an airplane, that they don't care about it. They just look at the P&L. But your dashboard is what tells you the health of your organization. In the same way that you wouldn't want to fly a plane without the right dashboards, you don't want to run a business without looking at the right dashboards. Now, the thing is, you don't need hundreds of complicated dashboards. You just need like 5 or 6 or maybe 10 key indicators that you look at every month.
Find someone in your community and have them come and set that up. It is so overwhelming trying to do that. But find someone early on that can sit down with you and go, okay, here's the 10 things you need to be looking at. And then that's where your improvement, and that's how you make corrections and changes. So,
all right, final fundamental of the day is marketing complexity. There are so many marketing gimmicks out there that it's hard to tell the difference between a fundamental and a gimmick. So this is a good acronym that you can use when you're thinking about marketing, and this is your marketing basket. Brand, advertising, sales funnel, key technologies, excellent stories, and tribe. If I'm going to spend $1,000 on marketing, or I'm going to spend $100,000 on marketing, these are the 6 categories that you want to think about funding. Your B is your brand. How do you make people feel? When somebody comes into your office, when somebody looks at your business card, when somebody sees your website, how does it make them feel? Your A is advertising. You've got 2 types of advertising. I've got inbound advertising and I've got outbound advertising. Inbound advertising is, what do I type into Google to find you? Outbound advertising is, how do you get your message across when I'm driving down the road or listening to the radio or whatever I'm doing? Your S is your sales funnel. And I've got suspects, who are people who one day will need my service. Prospects are people who are looking for a solution. Leads are people who have come into contact with me, and then opportunities are people that I've actually contacted back. So what do I do for each of these things? Suspects, prospects, leads, and opportunity. Your key technology, what does our e-commerce platform look like? What does our web hosting look like? What technologies do we have? Excellent stories. Am I telling my story with a video? Am I telling it with a brochure? How do I tell my story? And then your tribe is the group of people who follow you. They're into what you do, and they follow you. Don't start by hiring a gimmick salesperson. Hire a strategist that is going to say, okay, here, you're going to spend 2% of your revenue on marketing. This is the best 2% that you can spend in your area. Here's what you should do. Or you're going to spend 5% or whatever you're going to do. Not doing that is really, you don't want to be a gimmick marketing firm. You want to have a really good marketing strategy. So those are some of the fundamentals for marketing.
That was a jam-packed session. My number's down there. I'm in Murfreesboro. I appreciate you guys letting us come in and.
Yeah. And so we recorded this. So if you want a copy of the video, I'll put it on YouTube or whatever. Just send me an email and we'll send you a link. I just want to say too, you have so much potential to do so much good. and just go do good. You know, it's more fulfilling to do something significant. Get out there and kick butt. And like Mark and I said, you know, we're glad to help in any way we can. It's been really great. Thanks for letting us gibber for a while.